Welcome to our Women's History Month series. This series, it looks at the voices and achievements of local female leaders. Today we celebrate Kait Gallagher-Wilsterman. She's a young woman who has created a name for herself as a compassionate leader in our community and an incredible role model for her daughter. Listen to our conversation as we talk about the balance of motherhood and community leadership. So I'm doing these International Women's Day and Women's History Month interviews, and you are somebody in this community who has been a leader at the top of her game for a couple of years now. And I mean,
it's scary to think about, but
no, I think it's a huge honor. I mean, last year you were nominated, and then you got the recognition as being one of the top leading ladies under 40 years old.
I mean, you were on that list too.
Right, but I mean, yes, thank you. But it's such an incredible honor.
Yes.
And with that comes kind of a lot of responsibility. And you kind of feel like, oh, well, now I have this presence I need to maintain in the community. First, I want you to tell me how you got to where you are, because you are really involved with multiple organizations here in this community. And then we'll kind of go from there.
Absolutely. So work-wise, I work for Tusco MFG in Janaden-Hutton, and I'm the marketing and community relations manager there, which is just an incredible position to be in. So I get to talk about all the incredible things that Tusco does, but I also get to be out in the community and interfacing with organizations and working with them. I say Tusco, our work is custom metal fabrications and custom retail displays. So we don't really work with clients in our community, but our clients are our associates, their families, their friends, and being good stewards of our community. So anytime I get to be out in the community, it's awesome, because that's an opportunity to talk about Tusco and what we offer as a company with culture and benefits and hiring, but also getting to support different organizations. So Tusco has been a great spot for me, but prior to that, it was 20 years ago as a high school student that I first got involved with Little Theater of Tuscarawas County. I was doing theater at Central Catholic High School, and I was encouraged to audition for a show at Little Theater, got in the ensemble, and I have never left. And so, it's this summer actually is 20 years since the first time I was involved.
20 years.
Yeah, since the first show.
So it means a lot to you.
It absolutely does. It's been a location and a group of people in a community, in a community theater that I have been a part of through some of the hardest times of my life. So 2 deployments where my husband was in Afghanistan, I fell in with my community at the theater. They were the people that I was with that were supporting me, that I was able to be involved with. Those high school days when you're kind of in between friend groups, or you're trying to figure out what you're doing and who you are.
Yeah.
That's where the theater was for me. And so now I serve as the secretary for the board of trustees, and then I assist with the marketing campaigns for the theater. So it's very much full circle, and I get to be behind the scenes, and I get to help every single director and show in our seasons. So it's really cool. I also like to be on stage, and I've directed and I've volunteered in pretty much any capacity you can think of. But it's just a very exciting place to be, because I get to see those high school kids who are discovering it for the first time, but I also get to see the little kids who are in the children's workshop. And like my daughter, who last year went to see SpongeBob and went to see Your Good Man Charlie Brown, and her just love of it and love of seeing people on stage and getting lighting up. Absolutely, and getting to be involved with that. And so it's just such an important organization to this community, and I love having the opportunity to give back to it, because it's given so much to me over the years, and has been such a huge part of my life. And I also serve on the Tuscarawas County Public Library Board. I've been on that board for 7 years,
we are readers.
Yes.
We love to read.
Love to read.
Yes.
So I'm the vice president of that board, and I love it. And it's also an incredible organization in the community, just like all of our libraries are. Dover Library, Janaden, Claymont. We are very, very lucky in Tuscarawas County, because we have so many incredible free public libraries that are available.
I know. That's one thing I always tell people whenever they come on our show. The library systems here in Tuscarawas County are
top tier. Absolutely.
Yes, they're the best. They give back in so many ways. So.
Absolutely. And the programming and just what the staff members can do on a shoestring budget, because people who work in libraries aren't just librarians. They aren't just pulling books. They're education professionals. They're doing programs where kids are coming in and learning everything from music to sounds to their letters to
language,
everything, and then having all of those pieces come together and the presenters that come in and just the different things that are available are just incredible, and I just love it.
We talked briefly a little bit about COVID off the air, and I feel like the libraries were vital to our communities during that time.
Absolutely. And that you can still, the library was an easy place for people to come and get free COVID tests. The library is still distributing free COVID tests to anyone who needs them.
Right.
So having that opportunity and things like, this winter didn't get as cold as usual, but the libraries always serve as warming centers. So for people who've lost their heating or are in a situation where they need that extra support, you can always go to the library. And the library is a space where you can exist without the expectation of buying anything or spending any money. And though that is so rare. That's not there's not really places that have that expectation or where you don't have that expectation anymore. But you go to the library, nobody's going to ask you for anything. There's no requirement. You just show up and you just can exist in that space.
And there's so many things you can do there.
Yes.
And it's just fantastic.
Yep.
What made you get involved with that organization to begin with years ago? Besides being a lover of books and reading.
I can't remember actually how the trajectory kind of went. I feel like I was referred to apply. I lived in Strasburg at the time, and the Tuscarawas County Public Library Board is made up of individuals who live in all of the branch districts. So the branch libraries are Strasburg, Sugar Creek, Tusky, and then Bolivar. So there's a representative from each of those communities on the board, and then there are 3 additional board members from New Philly, and they're considered at-large. So they can also be from kind of outside of the district. So we have outside of like New Philly proper, but still in our service district. So one of our board members resides in Stone Creek, but because that's still part of our service district, but not New Philly at large or any of the specific communities. And I was living in Strasburg at the time, and the representative in the Strasburg seat had resigned, and it had decided it was time for them to move on from that position. And I was approached to apply for it. And so put in an application and went through a little interview process and got to join the board. Yeah, and here I am 7 years later. Well, in the state of Ohio, library board terms are 7 years. Because the library is governed by the state, because libraries receive state funding in Ohio. The Ohio Revised Code actually sets up how all that works. So it's a 7-year term. Oh, wow. And 4 years ago, my family moved to Tusky. And at that time, the Tusky representative, she had decided to resign to retire elsewhere. And so it made sense, and I shifted into the Tusky position, and then we brought on a new Strasburg rep, which was really cool. And I've been the Tusky rep for the last 4 years, but my term is up in December, and I will not be returning to the board after that time. But I'm excited to have this last year. Last year, we went through a strategic planning process, and that's been huge. So it was a big undertaking, and one of the coolest things is that I had my daughter, who will be 5 this fall, just before the main library reopened. So in all of the grand opening things, I'm holding this little 6-month baby and at the ribbon cutting and all this stuff. And so she got to be part of that, which was very cool.
Isn't it so fun to be a mom?
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the best gift. Well, let's talk about being a mom.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with it being Women's History Month, tell me about your daughter and how being a mother and a leader in this community, what does that mean to you in her eyes?
One of the coolest things is that there's a little bit of where my daughter thinks I'm famous, and you may run into this with Evelyn too.
Yes, I do.
Because you are famous.
Sure.
And so she, when we go places, she's just always excited because either myself or my husband pretty much
get recognized.
Get recognized. Same happens with my mom, because if anyone watching today ever went to New Philadelphia schools, they may have had my mother as a teacher.
She's the legend.
She's yes. So Eliza's very used to that. So I think there's a little bit of, for her, an expectation of that people just know, people just know who people are. And so it's very cool to get her to involved in the places where I'm involved, and to get her, because I'm involved, having the little extra layer of, I know the people working at the library. So when we went to the Friends of the Library breakfast last year, Tanya, who works in the children's department, was like, I'll take Eliza and we'll go play, and then you can go do things, and we'll just play. And I was like, Oh, okay. Great.
Works
Sounds
for me.
good. And to have that opportunity to introduce her to people that she may, if you're just using services, say hi and walk by, for her to get to build those deeper relationships so early. Excuse me, because I believe that sets up our young people for how to interact and how to grow and communicate with people as they get older too. And they have those investments in the community.
You're such a great role model for her.
Oh, well, thank you.
I mean, and your mom too, since we're talking about, we brought her up too, but the women in your life. And I think for a lot of moms, we always want to surround our children with, especially young girls, with positive role models.
Absolutely.
And how that's going to affect them later on in life. Tell me what that means to you, because you are a community leader. You give back in multiple ways. And is this something that you like kind of sought out, like when you were 18 years old, graduating from high school, and thought, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have a kid, and I want to be a good role model? I mean, of course you want to be a good role model. But did you think that you wanted to, volunteer for all of these organizations? And
I don't know. I would say for sure, Little Theater, I saw the opportunity that at some point I intended to circle back and be here. But I know in your story, similar to mine, of we left the area and then have come back here. So, I didn't necessarily anticipate having life here. I left to go to college. I thought that I was going to end up elsewhere, and I ended up moving home, finishing my degree here at Kent, and it was the best trajectory for me. But that opened up so many doors for me then to get back involved with what I saw as important to me as a kid, and then what I wanted to continue and see to grow. So I definitely don't think at 18 I was like, yes, I am going to want to serve on the library board,
Right.
But I knew the value of the library at that point. I saw the value there. I saw how important it was. Those things didn't necessarily cross my mind. And so I think that's something like that people like you and I are challenged with, and those people who are the role models, is we have to model that these things are there and that they're available, and that we can teach our kids, but kids in the community, that this is a part of how you continue for your community organizations to thrive and be sustainable.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest challenge now that I think we face is that, okay, great. So someone at some point said to us, can you do this? Would you want to do this? I went to, and this is very fitting for my story with Little Theater. Every year, Little Theater has a general membership meeting. Anybody in the community can come. If you're a member, you get to vote, and there's board elections. It's in September each year when our fiscal year starts. I went to the meeting just to attend it because we had come back to the area. Andrew had been deployed. I was trying to build some more connections again because all I was doing was work. I was working, and it was a hard time, understandably so. And I went to this meeting, and I was sitting with the mom of one of my high school friends who had been someone who was very involved in the theater. And she goes, "Do you want to run? You should run for the board." The secretary was leaving. Her term was up, and she said, "You should be the secretary. You should run for the board." And I said, "Okay." She goes, "Oh yeah, Candace just did it for a year, so just you can just do it for a year." And I said, "Okay." I didn't know the terms were 3 years, so a board term is 3 years at the theater. She tricked me. I'm grateful she did every day. It was a 3-year term, and I said, "Yeah, I'll be the secretary," and that was 13 years ago. Wow. And so I ran and did those 3 elected years, and then after that, I'm no longer a voting trustee, so I don't get to vote on any decisions that are made or anything like that. I keep the records pretty much, but I get to continue to keep the records and get to be a person who provides that history and here's reference material. How can we? I feel very historian librarian kind of setup.
It kind of all plays into
it kind of all plays into everything, and to be able to continue to support the organization that way. But if she hadn't said to me, I wouldn't have done it I wouldn't have run on my own. I would at that point in my life, it wouldn't have occurred to me to be like, yeah, that's totally something I want to do. I wouldn't have. Maybe someday I would have gotten there on my own, but not at that point.
Not right away.
Not right away, and so. that's, I think that's the challenge, is where do we have the opportunity to make those connections, and where do we have the opportunity to be that person for someone else and say, hey, have you thought about this? I think you should do this. And, whether that's, I just actually just shared a post on my story, and it said something like, surround yourself with women who will talk about you and when there are opportunities, or bring your name up for opportunities. And I think that's part of pushing people as well to say, hey, this might be a great opportunity for you. Maybe you should explore it. Doesn't mean anything has to necessarily come from it, but if there aren't those of us looking to the future and looking at the younger people behind us, where are we going to be in 20, 30 years?
Right.
And, you mentioned our designation last year of the 20 leaders under 40. So we're in that younger group of that, right?
For now. Couple more years.
For a few more years. But there's that gap there. And so how do we look at, okay, where are the 20-year-olds and where are those 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are coming up that are interested in getting involved in the community and want to give back to the community? And so how do we engage them, and how do we show them the opportunities?
Right. It's interesting you say that, because I just had a conversation 2 days ago with Amy Ansel about the same thing, about how now that, and I, like you, was also, you should run for this. Yeah. And now I'm going to be a part of something, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And it makes you nervous, but it's nice to know that somebody believes in you.
Absolutely.
Outside of, your immediate family, and they see the potential in something you have. And I think you're right with, now that we're in this position, we need to look at the younger people and give them the opportunity to grow, like we've been given that opportunity.
And that's I'm involved with an organization called Volunteer Leaders in Action that has kind of it's kind of taken some setbacks since COVID. It was a volunteer support organization here in the community, and part of it too was Kathy Willoughby, who was the volunteer manager at Union Hospital. She, the late Kathy Willoughby, she passed away a couple years ago. And it was a huge, devastating loss in the leadership community and volunteer community here. And Kathy was very much the driving force of this organization. But a couple of years ago, Kathy and Robin Waltz from the United Way, when I was sitting on the planning committee, and or we call it steering committee, but it's the planning committee more or less. And they said, we think we need somebody to chair. There's no chair. And I said, I always thought Kathy was the chair, but apparently that wasn't a thing. And Kathy and Robin said, well, we think you should do it, Kait. And I'm sitting in this room with these hard-hitting women of our community and organizations that are huge, the United Way, Harkadis, Mobile Meals.
Intimidating.
And intimidating, absolutely. But they're looking at me saying, I think you can. I think this is something you can do. And so I was like, okay, well, let's give this a shot. And, that I think too, I serve on the Leaders of Tomorrow Planning Committee now, which is a one-day workshop for high school kids.
We just had it.
We just had it on Friday.
It was great.
Yes, it was awesome, and it's an awesome program. And we had almost 300 participants this year, which is one of our highest attendances. And it's such an important opportunity to instill in kids that they can lead from where they are too, but also to start thinking about where that leadership journey can take them, if that's something they want to pursue.
Right. That I love that program. Diane Launschlager.
Yeah.
She's helps with that as well.
Yes.
She does a great job.
She jokes that she's the herder of cats, because we're all our planning committee is like all people. All the heavy we're all heavily involved in the community and heavy hitters, and so she's tracking down me and Sarah Spees of the ESC and David Mitchell of the PAC, and
there's like so many.
Jennifer Deem of there's just so many little pieces that she has to kind of keep track of all of us, and awesome. And Orvis Campbell, who is the worst to keep track of. Like, let's,
like he doesn't have an important job.
Right, he does not, he's right. Just hanging out. So, like to get all of us together to do these, and yeah, Diane's a saint for it for sure. But she says she's the herder of cats. That's her official title. But you know, it's such an incredible program, and that schools recognize the value of it too, to send their kids to it, because they do take a whole day off. They lose a day of school. And it's great to see the schools recognizing that too, and where those opportunities are.
Now, in celebration of Women's History Month, what does that mean to you? Women's history. What's the importance of it to you?
I think for me, it's the remembering who has come before you and who has helped you up the ladder as you've gone. So, you know, I'm not necessarily great at looking far back history, like far past history, but looking at my own history, looking at our history, looking at who are the women who've played a part in our lives to continue our ascension to wherever we are, to what we're striving for, and those pieces. And I think that's an important thing, is that you don't want to lose sight of the here and now of the history in preference to when, you know, the suffragists were fighting for women to be able to vote or something like that. Very important.
Right.
But we also need to make sure that we pay attention to the history that's happening to us today, immediately and today. Yeah.
What's the biggest obstacle you think for women, whether it be in the workforce, whether it be moms, stay-at-home moms?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think is the biggest obstacle just for women?
Well, I think in general it's childcare and balance. So women in the workforce specifically are challenged with that balance. Any parent in the workforce is challenged with that balance, but it's just traditionally fallen more on the woman's responsibility. So making sure that childcare is taken care of, and we have a lack of affordable, safe, reliable childcare, specifically here in this county. I've just recently had a couple of conversations surrounding that. And so it makes it hard, because people want to be in the workforce, they want to be involved, but
that holds them back.
It holds them back. It absolutely does. And that's one of the things that I think is incredible about what specifically my employer does, is we offer a lot of flexible scheduling, which is not usual, which is a little bit unusual in manufacturing. And so a couple years ago, we started a program where we were bringing high school kids in after school to work at the plant. Awesome. We're directly across the street from Indian Valley High School. How convenient, right? But at that same time, we added an all-call that went out to the parents that said, hey, you drop your child off at school in the morning and want to pick them up after school. Would you want to work in that 9 to 2 time frame? Let's get you in part-time. You can work for us in the time frame that works for you. Wow. We can be flexible with that scheduling. So, you know, recognizing where those opportunities potentially are too in our community is huge. And it's because it's not that like moms don't want to be involved. Sometimes it just makes more sense for someone to be a stay-at-home mom. I had a friend who was in the workforce full-time, but the childcare costs were so exorbitant that it was actually less money. They were losing less money for her to quit her job and stay home and not have to pay for childcare, which is just absolutely crazy. So when we can build those opportunities to fit the lives of the people, the real people in our community, it betters our community over time as well. And it makes such a positive impact. And, you know, we are, and on the emotional, mental side of it is always the mom guilt.
Yes.
But
it's real.
It's very
so
real.
real.
And it's a lot of times unwarranted. You know, my husband loves being with my daughter, but I still have that twinge of like, oh, I shouldn't schedule something in the evenings because I already have a board meeting this week. So I feel, you know, I feel bad, but he loves playing. Like they go outside and play, or they go to the park, and they have a great time together.
Yeah.
But there's still that level of I'm not there, and I'm not being active, and I'm not being engaged. And so what I hate to throw the failure word around, but you internalize so that real. Sometimes, and like it's not reality, but that doesn't make it. That doesn't mean you don't feel it. And you know, a phrase that I use a lot is logical, rational Kait knows that this isn't the case, but that doesn't mean that it's not a real feeling, that emotional connection isn't real, isn't valid, because it is.
Yeah, you kind of struck a little.
Yeah, I understand.
It is very real, and you feel really bad. But then, like your logical Kate talking, I will go home and think, I had to go to this meeting or this function or do this, or we had to do like a remote broadcast, and I missed out on something. Then I think, you know what, it's okay. Like years from now, she'll be so proud.
Yep, absolutely.
Women like us are actually out there representing ourselves with such dignity and in the community in a good light and doing good things. We're not just out there willy-nilly, doing things we shouldn't be doing. Yeah. So,
but it's still hard. Like, it doesn't make it less hard, but it also reminds me of where I make sure that she's the priority of things.
Of course, right.
So, I'm very, very lucky in the way that my job and my schedule can be structured. My daughter is 4, so she's in half-day preschool right now. And she so we let her, she stays up a little bit later at night. She does afternoon preschool because otherwise, that after work time is gone. So, and so for us, it makes sense. She has a later bedtime. She sleeps in a little bit in the morning. So I work until she wakes up, get her set up with her breakfast. A lot of times she's crafting doing crafts, eating, enjoying her little lunch, and then we go to school. But I get to have that time with her.
Yes, that's so important.
So having that time and that consistent time, but in the evening I have to go to a meeting or I have to go do something else or something like that, and then Dad can jump. My husband can jump in, and he loves dadding. His favorite thing is being dance dad. So like he is. She does dance class on Tuesday nights, and so he's all about like taking her to dance class and those kind of things. So it's finding that balance. I think is a good way to think about it, of what you're willing to trade and where those trades lie. And I think that's a hard thing too, at least for me. And I'm going to guess it's hard for you too, is the saying no to things when you're approached in the community, and have that when somebody says, oh, we could really use your help on this committee or with this program. It would be awesome. Are you interested? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I would absolutely be interested.
And then you go home and you're like, why did I say
yes? Oh, yes. Yeah. I'm really proud of this. And, but I was recently approached to work with an organization in the community that they were looking for some new volunteers, and I got some information on it. I was looking at the calendar and looking at things, and then I found out a couple of things that weren't changing at the same time that I thought they were. And I had to come back and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I love I love the message. I love the mission of this, but I'm not going to have the capacity for this. And so I'm grateful for my boss, Mike Lauber, who has pushed me on that for the last four and a half years while I've worked at Tusco, learning to say no. And he jokes, because he's worse than me about it. If people approach him and ask him to do things, he does it. So sometimes I feel like we have a little support group between the two of us. We're like, okay,
I sometimes think that saying yes makes you a good leader, but then because you want to help.
Yep.
It's in your bones. Like that's what you want to do. If somebody wants you to come out and say, hey, will you help with this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what makes you a good leader. But I think what makes you an even better leader is knowing, like, okay, I actually can't, so I'm going to need to step back just for a little bit, but thank you, and think of me for next time,
Absolutely. And that's, I think we also have to be okay with reevaluating where those type of experiences are. So I've been kind of on a journey for a while of reevaluating where my volunteer time is going and what's really fulfilling for me and what I feel is valuable. And this is my little tidbit if anybody wants to take it away. So an easy thing to think about is swaps. So if you're taking something new on, what are you willing to give up for that swap?
That's a good one.
And maybe and so sometimes you have to stop and think, is it going to be that I'm going to lose time with my family? Is it going to be something like that tangible? Or is it, what, I think my time on this committee or working on this program has run its course, so I'm going to step away and give someone else an opportunity to take that. And so my piece of advice is, for me, what has kind of where I've refocused to is looking at, if I am not uniquely adding value or uniquely contributing to whatever volunteer, whatever position, and someone else could do it just as well as me, and I'm not the only one who can do it or the person who can do it best, it's time to walk away.
Yeah.
Because if I'm filling a role where you would be equally as good in that role as me, I think that I'm going to give that opportunity up and look for something where my value is going to be very, very unique and it's going to be a value add.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of things that I love that I'd love to be involved in the community. But when I look at them and I say, oh, but this person's already working with them and I'm going to add a similar perspective or a similar experience or similar, any of that, then I'm challenging myself to not try and pursue that, which has been
that's good.
It's been very hard, as I'm sure you can relate to it
a little bit. Yeah.
But yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's really helped me to kind of narrow down and put into perspective what I want to focus on personally, but also, okay, where are those other opportunities? And because there have been times where somebody's approached me for something and I've been really excited about it, but it just hasn't fit once I've looked at it further, or I've thought of someone else that I could suggest for it.
Yeah,
and I think that goes back to, our conversation about how do we identify who's coming next and what's coming next, and being the people who then encourage that, as opposed, like we had, the people who said, hey, you should run for this. Hey, you should try this. Hey, have you thought about this?
Yeah.
How can we be those people? And a lot of times it's because we're approached for things. And I can use a pretty tangible experience of somebody pushing me into that recently was for many years, Mike has hosted an Hour of the Rainbow Connection telethon.
Yes.
Yeah. And so when he was approached,
make you do it?
I was voluntold is the word that I like to use.
Love that.
But he was contacted about it and he said, hey, I think we need, and he has a strong philosophy of this too. And I know that that's where a lot of this has come from for me, of how do we look to the next and how do we look to the next generation? And that was his thought process on it. He was like, I'm an old guy who's been doing this for 100 years and I'm saying that and he will not be mad at me about it. But where are the other community members? Where are the younger community members that we can pull in? And so he asked me if I would go in his place this year. And so I hosted an Hour of the Rainbow Connection telethon on Sunday.
You did great.
And then I looked at the roster afterwards. Thank you. I had so much fun. Other than Carmel, as the retired executive director of the Rainbow Connection, I was the only other woman who hosted any of the segments.
Don't worry, I gave Percy a piece of my
mind.
Did you?
About okay.
That.
I'm just saying, so next year, hopefully you're on the roster. But I noticed it right away. And it was one of those things that drove me a little bit more to be like, absolutely, yes, I'll do this, because
there's no girls up
there's
there.
no girls up there. Like Carmel's wonderful and amazing. Like, don't get me wrong.
Oh, she's been there for years.
She's incredible, but there's nobody else. Like I think there's opportunity there too, because when you look at it, it was many business owners or faces of companies in our community, but there are women-owned businesses in our community too.
Dozens.
So how can we break that down? How can we continue to look past that and find those people to bring up? And maybe it's not the Rainbow Connection telethon necessarily,
right,
because they have an incredible board that is with women on it.
Yeah.
They have incredible support, and there was a Siobhan who is involved with us at Little Theater. She was running one of the cameras, and women were answering the phones and reading names, and they absolutely involved. But where are the other opportunities that we can recognize and say, where are these opportunities and where can we find them?
If you were to give one piece of advice to a high school graduate or maybe a young woman starting off in college who wants to kind of not necessarily have the same career trajectory, or maybe wants to be in the volunteer world like you are, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
Learn to say no early. Top tier. That's my top tier advice. Second is figure out what your priorities are. So what are the community organizations that are important to you? What are the things that if they were gone, would be detrimental, and maybe detrimental specifically to you. So you're in high school and you've been involved with an organization a long time, and if that organization hadn't existed for you in high school, what would that impact have been, and how can you look at that? So excuse me,
that's a great way
finding those places and getting involved and seeing how you can get involved and asking to get involved. Because more than likely, especially in a community of our size, we're very lucky. We have so many incredible organizations, but every single one of them needs more people.
Of course.
And that's a no-brainer. So, and they can't continue to exist without people who are interested. And so, maybe you're a kid who really likes hiking. WJER Fort Lawrence is constantly looking for volunteers to help them with trail maintenance and being a part of WJER maintenance and working in the village. And if you're into history, there are opportunities for everyone based on their interests. So trying to find where your niche and where your interests lie, yeah, and then pursuing that and getting involved.
I couldn't have mentioned it better myself. That was perfect.
Well,
that
good.
was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. I said that you would only be better than Martha if you made me cry.
I did.
And you did.
I got you I saw the one teardrop. So
there's that. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I appreciate
absolutely.
it. Yay.